Ghost of Tsushima is an action-adventure game released in 2020 where you play as the samurai Jin Sakai, and you protect Tsushima Island during the first Mongol invasion of Japan. The game is open-world and story-driven, with a dense, beautiful world that can be experienced both on PlayStation 4 and 5 consoles. Now that shit's out of the way, let's get to the important stuff. It features badass gameplay, where you choose if you want to honor your samurai heritage of striking down enemies where they stand in fun, quick standoffs, in careful strategic battles, or if you want to take the likely more efficient, though less honorable route of assassinating enemies before they get the chance to know you're even there. I just started Ghost of Tsushima and have sunk probably around 3.5 hours into it, so this is more of a first impressions and general grasp on the game. Nonetheless, let's get into the difficulty. When starting the game for the first time, you can choose a difficulty which can be adjusted during the game. There are 4 difficulties: easy, medium, hard, and lethal. Apparently lethal was added soon after release, but since it is still the hardest, I am playing on that. This makes both your attacks and the enemy's attacks nearly an instant kill. From my experience thus far, excluding bosses, you can pretty much kill all enemies in 2 strikes, and all enemies can kill you in either 1 or 2 strikes. Oh, and right after this, you get to pick language and subtitle options. Considering that this is a game about samurai that takes place in Japan, I went with Samurai Cinema, where the dialogue is all in Japanese with English subtitles. The alternatives were English with English subtitles, or the interesting Kurosawa mode, where there is a black and white filter over the game, or maybe just the cutscenes, I'm unsure on that one, and it is in Japanese with English subtitles. This mode is inspired by the movies of legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. I won't lie, the name rings a bell, but I don't know if I've seen any movies by him. Although I will say that I think it's awesome that this is at least an option. So I did the mission that introduces you to the stealth mechanics, the mission that rewards you your bow, and some side quests and activities to unlock the second fighting stance, the water stance. Admittedly, the stances and stance change, again, this is just from what I've gathered this far, is a little underwhelming. It looks cool, but just changes your quick triangle attack used to break the guard of enemies. And on lethal difficulty, it's not very often that I must break an enemy's guard. The Mongols strike quick and often, though in turns, so you simply wait for the opponent to attack, either parry or dodge, and then kill them with 2 strikes. It's very simple, but much easier said than done. This is a steep learning curve, especially if you're going in blind straight to lethal difficulty. I died a lot. I spent nearly an hour on my first real boss fight, and not the one against the main villain that is an intended failure, no, I mean this dickwad. Warlord Dogar. He is the leader of a small settlement that the Mongols captured from the Japanese, and since it was on the way to the first tail mission I wanted to do, I decided it would be a good opportunity to learn the base combat mechanics before really getting into the game. And let me say, that was a mistake. I died so much to Warlord Dicker that the game started asking if I'd had enough after each death. The abilities you get within the first few hours of gameplay make this game incredibly easier. There's a heal, which is pretty much useless in lethal difficulty, but there's an ability that lets you use 3 resolve, which you gain from killing enemies and doing stylish shit, to revive yourself. I had a feeling this was a feature because whenever you are killed, quote-unquote killed, the enemies do a bunch of weird staring and circling to you while you lay down before eventually actually executing you. Anyways, here's a quick montage of me failing miserably to learn the combat mechanics. Now, finally, I picked up on the fact that, at least on lethal difficulty, the combat is literally turn-based. The opponents almost always attack one by one, similar to older Assassin's Creed games. So, very similar to Assassin's Creed, you parry and then execute. This is by no means a very in-depth combat system, but they got the speed and brutality of the strikes tweaked well enough to provide a lot of challenge when starting out. And I will say that the combat, and especially the standoffs, feel very weighty, brutal, and fun. After an excruciating 50 minutes, I finally killed Warlord Dogshit. As I said, this was my first real boss fight, and despite the unnecessary struggle, this was extremely rewarding. I got my first handful of skill points, I got a little closer to unlocking my first new fighting stance, and immediately the Japanese began re-inhabiting the town, so it felt like I actually accomplished something with all that work. After this, I went to do my first tail mission. Tails seem to be essentially quest lines in Ghost of Tsushima, so I was interested to see how this went. And let me just say that story-wise, these tales do not disappoint. I won't spoil too much, but there are some twists and developments that actually gripped me with these brand new characters. Though I will say again that in terms of gameplay, I was yet to come across anything revolutionary besides the graphics. Dipping into that real quick, this game on the PS4 looks astonishing. Occasionally there will be awkward looking wind effects or way more blood and grime than is necessary, but this game really is amazing graphically, and they know it because they have one of the best photo modes I've come across, and for the most part all UI in this game is extremely minimal. You don't constantly have a compass up and icons flooding all over your screen. Your health only shows up when actually necessary, and you don't have a bunch of gadgets and options on your screen constantly. It makes remembering buttons a little more important, but it really highlights the beauty of Tsushima Island. Anyways, back to the tale. That looks like a wall you should climb. There's some interesting investigation throughout this tale, which isn't very hard. The UI occasionally directs you on where to go and what to do, and the clues are very easy to find. I will say that the story is extremely cutscene driven, sometimes annoyingly so. Again, getting sidetracked towards the start of the game, as soon as you pick up your sword for the first real time outside of the intro, you are immediately thrust into a flashback. It's pretty common for this to happen in games, but this was about 7-minute cinematic that took place right at the start of the game, and this is pulling you from a burning Mongol-infested village mid-raid to a calm practice session with leaves that move. Now I see that what they were going for, it certainly helped connect with Jin and his uncle more, but the placement I feel was a bit strange, and this isn't the last time this happens either, but we'll go into that later. Now, back once more to the tale. During this tale, you unlock the half bow, which makes combat infinitely easier, and finally lets you kill archers without any dumb shenanigans like this. Other than that, it's a pretty standard little mission with an interesting storyline that made me interested in continuing the Sensei's story, despite it feeling like somewhat of a side quest. I don't have much more to say on that one, the story was good, but gameplay-wise it didn't stand out that much. Oh, also, remember Warlord Dokar? Remember how I nearly went insane trying to beat him? Yeah, he was a leader, so I assumed all leaders would be that difficult. But, boy was I wrong. So I unlocked the water stance and tried it. Even when I come across Mongols with shields, I never really have issues dealing with them since you just wait for them to attack and then riposte. It's possible that this system gets expanded in the future, so we'll hold off on that, but now, on to the next tale. This felt a bit more like it was continuing the main storyline, and if you want to know why, it's because within 5 minutes of starting the tale, I was already going into a flashback. This played on the ideals of the samurai and provided explanation on why Jin was so hesitant on assassinating people. Again, I'll avoid major spoilers, but I will say that this flashback once again pulled you out of an otherwise intense situation to give backstory. But this felt way more solid than the previous one. It fit very well, and I actually kind of felt for Jin after this cinematic. Something past as common nature in almost all games, murder, felt like it was being taken more seriously here. Did it stop me from hunting down and stabbing almost every guard in the ass? Absolutely not. But it did make me feel bad for doing it. Kinda. This was a very short and simple mission, and made me realize that stealth is probably the easiest way to go on lethal difficulty. They are pretty generous on the assassination windows, and I got through this mission without so much as a scratch. This mission unlocked assassinating and eagle vision, or focused senses, so I could focus to see enemies through walls and whatnot, so felt pretty worthwhile. After this, I headed off towards another main tale, but got stuck into a side quest and some random skirmishes on the way there. The side quest was interesting. A boy was stuck in the center of a bridge with Mongols shooting up at him from either side down below, which didn't look very dangerous, but I decided to help out anyway. I encountered something that I really liked here. When I went to do an assassination without second thought, the game did a quick mini callback to the cutscene, showing a quick shot and replaying dialogue from the cutscene to try to make me feel bad for giving the Mongols a taste of their own medicine. Again, I didn't feel that bad, but I was happy to see that they were trying. Maybe it's just because I play too many stealth games and I've lost all empathy for enemies once their backs are to me and I can just press square to end their virtual lives. Anyways, this side quest was pretty easy, archers are pretty annoying, and you run out of arrows real quick, so I did die twice during it, but it wasn't all that difficult compared to my prior trauma with Lord Farquaad. This did award me with one skill point and my first ever charm, but unfortunately the charm is for defense, and in case you haven't noticed, just about anything that touches my sensitive samurai cheeks causes me to physically implode, so that was borderline useless. Skill point was nice, but you can tell that some of this was made for the lesser difficulties, like the charms. So, to wrap this up, I am really enjoying my time with Ghost of Tsushima thus far. It provided plenty of challenge thus far, and while I'm skeptical about if that will be persistent throughout the rest of the game, it's far too early to judge. The story is fantastic. Despite a number of cliches, I am very interested to see where it'll take me, and even the side quests seem fairly entertaining. The gameplay itself on lethal difficulty is simple but efficient, very fun, and as I have said, reminiscent of older Assassin's Creed games. Personally, I love Assassin's Creed, so that is no issue to me, but I'm not sure if it's for everyone. I have a few tiny gripes, but they are nothing that can hinder my enjoyment so far. Bugs have been Bugs have been minimal, so far only funny and beneficial things with AI, except that one time I was stuck under a house, that was a bit weird. And obviously the graphics are fabulous. My first impression of Ghost of Tsushima is a solid 10 out of 10. Once I got a grasp on the combat, I really started loving this game. And while you should keep in mind that this is far from my final verdict, which will be its own video after I have finished the game, this is my current rating for the Ghost of Tsushima. Alright. Oh, alright, looks like we're going back to Castle Canada. Fuck yeah. Eh?